I'm going to show how to collect an IR spectrum of a solid product using the Nujol Mull technique. And to do it, I'm going to use the product from the photochemical isomerization lab, the cis-1,2-dibenzoyl ethylene. Eventually, what you'll want is a thin film of the solid product suspended in between the salt plates with the Nujol mineral oil, but that can be hard to do when you have large crystals. So you can mold the crystals in between the salt plates to crush them up, but that often will scratch the salt plates. So what's better to do is to crush up the crystals beforehand using a Teflon stopper, which will create a fine powder that won't scratch the salt plates when you mold them together. And now you're ready to transfer the product over to your salt plates. You won't need very much, so you can just use your spatula to add a small amount of the product onto one of the salt plates. And now the trick here is to find the right ratio of your product to the Nujol mineral oil so that all of the peaks show up well on the spectrum. Because if you have too much Nujol, that's basically all you'll see. Or if you have too much product, then you'll see a large slant on the spectrum. So you might have to just mess around with a little bit until you find that right ratio. In order to not add an excessive amount of Nujol, I would expel all of the oil out of the pipette and then wipe it onto the sides of the container so that only a small residue of the oil is left on your pipette. Then you can gently press it to the other salt plate, maybe expelling some air using the bulb, and place the salt plates together so that the product and mineral oil can interact. Now you can mull your salt plates by gently rubbing them together and spinning them slightly. And you'll want to do this until the product is dispersed pretty evenly and has created a film with the oil between the salt plates. You can then place your salt plates into the spectrometer and collect your sample now. And then on the spectrum, there are a few things to watch out for. For example, there are large peaks for the carbon-hydrogen bonds, and that's coming from Nujol because the mineral oil is composed of a bunch of hydrocarbons. So those peaks can be really dominant if there's too much Nujol compared to how much product you place on the salt plates. To analyze it better, you can go ahead and click on the Find Peaks icon and click high enough to include all of the pertinent peaks. And again, you can see the carbon-hydrogen peaks coming from the Nujol, which are a little bit larger than the carbonyl peak from the product, which is usually the sharpest and most prominent peak on a spectrum. So this just means that a little bit too much Nujol was added. What you want to see is the carbonyl peak ending up as prominent, if not more so, than the carbon-hydrogen peaks from the Nujol. If you end up adding a little bit too much Nujol as well, what you can do is remove your salt plates from the spectrometer, separate them from each other, and then wipe one of them completely clean using a Kim wipe. Then you can simply add a little bit more product to see if that creates a better ratio. And you'll want to mull your salt plates together once more just to make sure that the added product is dispersed evenly. Now you can place your salt plates back into the spectrometer and collect your sample once again. This time you can see that the carbonyl peak is more prominent and ends up lower than the carbon-hydrogen peaks, which is what you want, so this turned out pretty well. There is a slight slant on the spectrum here, meaning that I could have molded the salt plates a little bit better together, but overall this isn't too bad. Once you're done, you can print this out and label it just like you've done on the previous IR spectra.